Yo, Headliner Nation, it is championship week. We finally made it. Hopefully, all of you out there in at least one of your leagues are trying to bring home the trophy this season. Now, if your championship is not this week and you play for it in week 18, I'm going to need you to smack around your commissioner a little bit because those are ridiculous leagues. Don't play in those leagues. They don't make any sense. Have your championship in week 17. So for those of you out there that are playing for that trophy this week, I've got a few guys in this week's waiver wire video that are exclusively guys that I think you might be able to play this week. That is it. There is nobody on this video other than guys that you might be able to plug into your lineup. Now, some of them are going to be deeper plays for you, those of you in deeper leagues or dealing with a lot of injuries or whatever it may be. Some of them might be plays that it just, absolutely makes sense. I would play them too if I had them. So there's going to be a little mixture of all those guys. So hit the like button for me, subscribe if you're new here to the channel, and let's go ahead and hop right into the information. We're going to talk about a couple of running backs first, and there's only two running backs that we might be taking a look at. And the first guy listed is going to be my Fantrax first up of the week, and it's Tyler Algier from Atlanta going up against the Arizona Cardinals. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't do the running back video, Jake does. So I'm going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what Jake has to say about Tyler Algier. I think he could be a championship winner this week. I really do. He's got a great matchup. Going up against Arizona, they allow the 8th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. And not only that, he's coming off a game in which he got 18 carries for 74 yards, saw another 5 targets for 4 receptions of 43 yards, and he has 4 straight games with double-digit carries, averaging over 4 yards per carry in his last 5 games. So, I mean, he's playing well. Atlanta has dedicated their game plan to not only running the football with Cordarrelle Patterson, but also Tyler Algier. And Tyler Algier, for the most part, is performing just as well, if not better, in a volume capacity than Cordarrelle Patterson is. I mean, he's a guy that if you stick into your lineup, I definitely think double-digit fantasy points is more than capable this coming week against Arizona because they're going to be running the football and they're going to run it a lot. We already know that. Now, some of you might be commenting that, with the weather last week, maybe that's why they ran it a little bit more. No, they've been doing this for 4 weeks now. This isn't new. They've been doing this for a few weeks now. This is how their game plan is set up. This is how they're going to try and beat you. The only other person that I would take a look at this week would be Royce Freeman for Houston. And really with Royce Freeman going up against Jacksonville, this is a defense that allows just over 23 fantasy points to opposing running backs. He's kind of the lead back the last couple of weeks since Dameon Pierce went on IR. 27 carries total the last couple of weeks. So you're looking at anywhere probably to 12 to 15 carries coming up against Jacksonville here this week in a game in which Houston's going to want to play spoiler. They've got Jacksonville that is kind of trying to make a run to the conference or to the division championship, and Houston wants to step in at this point and say, not on our watch. They want to do to Jacksonville what Jacksonville did to Indianapolis last season. So we'll see what happens with it. Not a high upside play for me, but again, 12 to 15 carries and maybe gets you anywhere between 6 and 8 fantasy points. What about the wide receivers? Let's talk about a few wide receivers. There are some good options this week. The first option maybe not so much, and it's Dante Pettis. Now listen, Dante Pettis, he's about as risky as stopping off at White Castle on that road trip, right? Are you really going to make it to that destination before that bag of sliders rockets through your body? That's kind of the fire that you're playing with Dante Pettis this week. He's probably going to be the number one option going up against a defense that allows a lot of yards to wide receivers. I don't know what you're going to get this week, but you could get really, really good stats from Dante Pettis and a touchdown, or you could be absolutely miserable with the decision to play him. He's a high-risk start just for those of you that are looking for an emergency option at the wide receiver position. Rashid Shaheed going up against Philadelphia. Also going to be a little bit of a risky move this week, but it really depends on if Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry are out again. That's really what's going to bring Shaheed's value back to the forefront. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Tough game going up against Philadelphia, but New Orleans is still alive in the South, so expect them to come to play. And I believe they also want to try and ruin Philadelphia's chances of locking up that number one division or that number one seed. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's getting at Washington this week. Quiet game last week because of the weather. But hey, he's still the big playmaker in this offense going up against Washington this week. Isaiah Hodgins and Darius Slayton both going up against Indianapolis. I offered up Isaiah Hodgins as a suggestion last week going up against Minnesota, and it worked out well for you. Darius Slayton, I think, just ended up missing those 10 fantasy points. He had 79 yards, I believe is what it was, on 3 catches. So he just probably missed those 10 fantasy points that we needed. But now they're going up against Indianapolis. Indianapolis at the beginning of the season was very good against the pass, and it seems like they've gotten a little bit worse every single week. It's not the same defensive prowess that we saw earlier in the year. So starting Isaiah Hodgins, for me, I'm okay with him. He's going to probably be a start for me this week, a little touchdown dependent. And then Darius Slayton would kind of be that big play guy where, again, maybe he only gets you 3 or 4 receptions, but he's going to have some big plays with those. DJ Chark, absolutely on fire right now, and now Detroit is back home, going up against Chicago, coming off a really bad loss. That team is going to want to turn things around and put it to Chicago. Jared Goff averaging almost 3 touchdowns per home game. DJ Chark, absolutely lock me in. Lock me in this coming week for him. He is the solid wide receiver 2 in that offense right now, behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. Drake London going up against Arizona this week. He's probably a little bit of a safe start. Not a whole lot of upside because he's not scoring touchdowns. But if for some reason he was dropped in your league, I do notice he's around 65% owned across multiple platforms right now. So probably still highly owned, but might be rolling around out there in some shallower leagues. But 32 targets over the last 3 games. Over 70 receiving yards in all of those games, and then over 90 in 2 of those 3. So he's getting the only looks from Desmond Ridder right now. Jahan Dotson for Washington going up against Cleveland. Touchdowns in 3 straight games for him. And who knows, maybe Carson Wentz is going to be the starter this week. If he is, Jahan Dotson, keep in mind at the beginning of the season, Dotson had 4 touchdowns in 4 games with Carson Wentz under center. George Pickens going up against Baltimore with Kenny Pickett. With Kenny Pickett under center, Pickens has touchdown upside, and he would have that again in a pretty favorable matchup against Baltimore this week. Romeo Doubs. It feels like it's been forever since I've had a chance to say it, but Christian Watson left their matchup in week 16 with a hip injury. If he doesn't end up getting back, Romeo Doubs has 11 targets over the last 2 weeks. Let's talk about a couple of tight end options for you this week. And we actually have a few that might be decent options for you if you're streaming tight ends out there. First and foremost, Tyler Conklin, Zach Wilson. I don't know, with all the reports that New York is going to move on from him, who's going to start at quarterback this week, we'll wait to see. But if it's not Zach Wilson, if Zach Wilson does not start at quarterback this week, this is a Seattle team that allows the 2nd most fantasy points to tight end. I don't care if it's Mike White. I don't care if it's Joe Flacco. We are locking in Tyler Conklin against Seattle this week. Dawson Knox going up against Cincinnati. Cincinnati kind of middle of the pack against tight ends. Knox has a touchdown in 3 straight games now. I'm expecting Dawson Knox to have a pretty decent impact on this game as well. Cole Kmet going up against Detroit. The last time he faced Detroit, caught 4 of his 7 targets for 74 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Detroit also allows the 7th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Noah Fant going up against the New York Jets. Not great numbers last week, but he did score a touchdown. I don't know if Lockett's going to be back this week. That will be something to keep an eye on. We know Marquise Goodwin also banged up now at this point. If Goodwin and Lockett are both out, going up against a Jets team that allows 13 fantasy points to opposing tight ends, lock me in for some Noah Fant action this week. And then Tyler Higbee going up against the Los Angeles Chargers. It took Baker Mayfield becoming the quarterback for the Rams for Tyler Higbee to finally turn that volume into production. But it's one of the reasons why I've been telling you guys that I couldn't give up on him, because he's been getting so many targets. Well, now he's getting the touchdowns to go along with it. 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks with Baker Mayfield under center. Tyler Higbee continues to be a valuable option for him. What about some streaming options at the quarterback and defensive special teams positions? Quarterbacks, Jared Goff going up against Chicago. I mentioned it earlier. The Detroit offense is substantially better at home than they are on the road, and Jared Goff averages almost 3 passing touchdowns per home game. Davis Mills for Houston. They're going to be getting Jacksonville. I mentioned this earlier as well, trying to play spoiler against Jacksonville. Davis Mills actually hasn't been playing that bad, and the Houston Texans are actually playing very well over the last couple of weeks. They are holding tough against some very good opponents, and now they get that opportunity at home against Jacksonville. Davis Mills is a guy that, hey, maybe he only throws for a couple of touchdowns and maybe 200 yards, but maybe he doesn't lose your week either. Gardner Minshew going up against New Orleans. I know Jalen Hurts is making a push to play this week. I read that earlier. I don't know if he actually will or not. It kind of depends on, how risky the Philadelphia is wanting to be with him. Do they think Gardner Minshew can get it done against New Orleans? I mean, he completed 24 of 40 passes this past week. I mean, not great, but not bad considering he hasn't played it all this season. 355 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions against a good Dallas defense. And now New Orleans isn't really any better than them, so Gardner Minshew could have comparable numbers. And then Brock Purdy against Las Vegas. I mean, we'll just say it again, right? The guy has been a fantasy winner for several fantasy owners down the stretch here. The dude has just been consistent and good. Good for him. Good for him. It's always awesome to see stories like that. What about on the defensive side of the football? For the Giants, going up against Indianapolis. I mean, the Indianapolis offense has been suspect at best in recent weeks, and New York is going to be at home now. Obviously, this is being recorded before they play on Monday Night Football, so I don't know how Indianapolis will look on Monday Night Football. It'll be something to keep an eye on, but in this instance right now, in this point in time, the Giants at home against Indianapolis could be a great pickup. Seahawks going up against the New York Jets. I don't know who the quarterback is going to be, and it really doesn't matter a whole lot to me because I'll take the Seattle defense at home with playoff implications on the line. And then the Steelers going up against Baltimore. I mean, the Steelers D has struggled against the pass this season. Good for them as Baltimore can't throw the ball worth a crap right now, so that doesn't matter at all. Pittsburgh going up against Baltimore should offer you some high opportunity upside as well. And in this week's show, nobody to drop. Again, same thing I've done the last couple of weeks. Not going to mention anyone to drop. If you've got questions about some players that you think that you might drop to pick up somebody else, leave me a comment. I'm dropping player X, picking up player Y, yes or no, and I'll respond either yes or no to you. Headliner Nation, I know the crowd is dying down, and I know a lot of people are starting to kind of fade out from the football scene for this season. Don't go anywhere. I cannot relay to you through the camera how good of an idea it is for you to stick around all offseason long. If you just want to show up from weeks 1 to 18 to play fantasy football, nothing against that, but you're not going to get much out of it. If you really want to show your dominance over league mates, friends, colleagues, maybe your spouse, all right? Stick around all season, all off season. Catch all the content. Get yourself prepared for 2023 because we'll be here to help bring you home championships next season. But first, lock up your championships this week. I'm going to get out of here. Peace out. Stay safe and stay healthy, and I'll catch y'all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.